Is power about having great strength, or having the courage to overcome great odds, to silence the doubt and the doubters, influencing others, or believing in yourself? Is power about having the ability to imagine what comes next, or an uncontrollable curiosity, standing together, or being brave enough to stand alone? Is power having knowledge, or just knowing who you are and what you have to give? Or is it an inner wisdom that comes with a long-held passion to learn everything about a subject, just so you can improve it? At Rolls-Royce, we recognize that power shows itself differently in different people. That's why, for us, our power is our difference, and our difference is you.
Hi everyone and welcome. This is the first event in the Power Series. Thank you so much for joining us, and it's so wonderful to see so many graduates and students join us for the session today. I really hope you're going to find it both informative but also inspiring. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Ellie Long. I look after the attraction and recruitment and selection for our early careers programs across EMEA and APAC, but that simply means that myself and my amazing team are responsible for finding our future graduates, interns and apprentices. And if I'm honest, it's a brilliant job. I get to take part in events like this. I get to talk to people like you and our current talent and graduates and apprentices. And I really enjoy hearing your stories and ideas and ambitions. So please do share them with us in the chat today and kind of get involved in this session. The session will last till about 6:30. It's focused on courage, as I mentioned, and it's the first in our Power Series, which is a series of virtual events which will give you access to engage with some of the most important parts of Rolls-Royce, our people, and hear their stories around topics such as belief and curiosity. But for today, we're going to be talking about courage and neurodiversity and what this means to be someone who may see things differently, and how we can all play to our unique strengths. So I'm hoping, as I'm speaking, that something has popped up on your screen and you'll be able to be doing a poll right now. If not, it'll be appearing as I speak. If you're able to kind of give us some thoughts and feedback around how you identify. And this is so that we can capture and understand more about the people that have joined the session today. I want to reassure you that this is a safe space, and this session is designed to be something that you can ask the questions that you want to and to engage with us. So please feel comfortable sharing your stories, asking the questions to the guys that are here with us, and letting us know your thoughts. So that's enough from me and the introduction. We'll jump into our panel because that's who you're here to talk to today. And we'll come to Josh first, who is one of our graduates. So Josh, thank you for joining us. Do you want to just introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about how you joined Rolls-Royce?
Yeah, so I joined on the industrial placement back in 2016. So I studied systems engineering at Loughborough, and yeah, so I came on industrial placement, and I've been working for Rolls-Royce Control Systems. I still work for them now as well. I've just finished my graduate scheme, and so now I'm like a full-time professional person now. So yeah, so. I work on fuel control systems modeling now, so which is really fun. So I basically just do simulations and things like that for our accessories. So yeah, so that's how I joined Rolls-Royce. I guess so I've got ADHD. So basically what that means is it's like difficulties with basically executive functions, which are things to do with self-regulation, like attention, getting yourself going, like focusing when you want to focus and things like that. But it's not just you're bad at doing those things, it's actually that it's almost like it's either 0 or 100 with all of those things. So that's kind of where the space I live in. So some things I find really easy and some things I find really hard that other people don't find hard. And so I'm kind of like at a different wavelength to other people. That's how I'd kind of describe it. So for me, joining the company, I actually didn't know I had ADHD at the time. So I always kind of had like difficulties at school with like homework, lateness and coursework, and just like being too intense and emotional in certain aspects and kind of in that sort of way, and getting into trouble behavior and things like that. And then sort of obviously behavior got better with time and age, but difficulties at uni, like with organization and things like that, like it just compounded itself, especially with me kind of like looking like just general management when you become independent and everything. So I kind of just always kind of thought, oh, I'm just like lazy or something. I don't know, like, because that's what people were telling me. And I've obviously got comments about it, and I'll be defensive about it. And I kind of assumed, oh, okay, when I got the Rolls-Royce job, I was obviously really over the moon. Basically I was like, yeah, this is my chance to kind of turn over a new leaf and change forever or something like that, because this is for real now. But then when I obviously came into work, I realized that wasn't the case. At first it was good, but then I kind of fell into like the same patterns again, and I just started to realize something wasn't right, partially because obviously comments I'd get from people at work about maybe like my communication, which sometimes isn't the best. We might use like weird vocabulary or like really low level vocabulary where I'm not like fully focused and not really understand how I'm going to say things. Whereas other times, like right now or something like that, where I'm kind of being a lot clearer and engaging and things like that. So it's kind of one or the other, as I said. Basically, yeah. So comments about like lateness and things like that, like just hard for me to get like to work on time and things like that. But obviously, yeah. So yeah, that's when I kind of started to learn about what ADHD actually was, because obviously you kind of have this kind of stereotype in your head about like the kind of like crazy kid at school, which I kind of was, but kind of wasn't, because I did really enjoy school. Like I was like, I like learning and knowledge and science and things like that. So I was kind of a bit of both, but so I didn't really fit that category exactly. So I think that's why I didn't get caught. And obviously I did quite well at school, generally speaking. But yeah, so when I learned more about it, I then eventually got diagnosed at uni. When I came back, like I did enjoy my placement. I had kind of like had my issues, but I did really well and got really good feedback in general, and that was really a great opportunity. So obviously I came back, and then because I'd been diagnosed, I kind of came back with like a whole new outlook about myself and about things. And so I actually got like great support when I came back into work to an extent, because it's like that we have these employee resource groups such as like Open. So they basically, the mission statement is essentially becoming more open about disabilities, invisible and non-visible, and how they affect you, and how we're going to improve and help people be at their best. And so that like people within the company are coming together to like make that a reality within the company and make a change. But I think naturally Rolls-Royce is kind of built on neurodiverse people, like whether they know it or not. Just by the nature of being like a tech company and like engineering, especially. So there's obviously people on the autism spectrum, people with dyslexia, which gives you these strengths, obviously with the difficulties as well. But obviously, so naturally the environment was kind of already kind of good for me to work there, and I really do enjoy working at Rolls-Royce right now. But obviously, I think the next stage is really getting the awareness and getting the knowledge and getting the understanding to really take it to that next level and continue being the market leader. And that's kind of what we're doing right now, which is really exciting. And yeah, that's what I really enjoy, and I like that about the job, that side of things, because I'm able to make an impact. Because obviously right now we're looking into training for managers and training for recruiters about neurodiverse conditions, so not just ADHD, all the other different types of neurodiversity, and that's really exciting. So that's a great opportunity that I'm involved with. Obviously, I guess a struggle for me at the moment is, I guess, just the kind of typical things of just communicating with people sometimes, or kind of like being in my own head about the impression I'm giving other people. Like, let's say I haven't told them I have ADHD, because I don't go, oh, hi, I'm Josh, I've got ADHD. I don't think that's exactly the right way to do it. But so yeah, so there's things like that can kind of happen. So I kind of I've had to sort of learn and grow that that's not my only identity. Like, I am Josh, and I think that's kind of my next level of like maturity that I've got to, rather than I am ADHD or something like that. So yeah, so I kind of want to focus on strengths, and I want to focus on strategies rather than things I can't do, because I can do anything, and I think anyone can do anything, but it's obviously about having the right strategies for the right people. And then within the company, we're all sort of on this spectrum, right? Of like kind of people kind of, you have a bit of symptoms of ADHD and but if we kind of like design everything for the 1%, we sort of like help everybody. So like for me, an example would be if there's so much stuff going on the screen, it's super complicated. I just don't know where to start and things like that. So I think something designed for me is going to make things as simple as possible to kind of reduce the cognitive load, right? But then that's going to make everybody more productive if things are like made like that, because everybody's executive function system is like being worked less from that. So that's sort of like what we're trying to do. So yeah, it's good. Yeah. So I might have been ranting on for a bit long, but essentially that's it.
No, that's great, Josh. Thank you. And I think there's some really great bits that you said in there around playing to your strengths, and now you know where your strengths are and the things that you struggle with that I think will probably resonate with a lot of people. And I saw a lot of the other guys, Phoebe and Rebecca nodding throughout. So yeah, no, definitely. And I'm sure if anyone's got any kind of questions for anything that Josh has said, please do post them in the chat as we're going through, and we'll have some Q&A time afterwards. But if we go over to Phoebe now, and Phoebe, if you want to introduce yourself, I won't take your limelight, but Phoebe is our winner of Female Undergraduate of the Year, and so has got some great story to share around her internship with us this year and winning that award. So yeah, over to you, Phoebe.
Cool. Thank you very much, Ellie. And I did just want to echo what Josh said and Ellie said. So much you said, Josh, I can relate to myself and my experiences. Like, almost heartwarming, humble to see someone else talk about the same things that I'm probably now going to talk about. So here we go. So my name's Phoebe. I'm a 4th year mechanical engineering student at the University of Nottingham, and I did a summer placement with Rolls-Royce, and I worked in the system design integration department, which was really, really cool. So a bit about my journey. So I guess as all things kind of go, autism is really underdiagnosed in women. So it's kind of no wonder that this is how I ended up to get here. But always in school, I remember being at a summer camp and having my dinner, and I ate my food in separate orders. Like I ate my sprouts, then I ate my greens, and I ate my, a little bit of salami or jacket potato. And a girl said to me, she was like, oh, and this is one of the course leaders, oh, like, Phoebe, that's what people with autism do that. And I was like 5 at the time, and that's quite a lot to say to a young girl. But with that information, I couldn't really do anything. And I guess little things in my life always came up like that. I remember being in a group situation, and a friend, after I left, said, oh, Phoebe, you can only speak to one person at a time. And I think, oh, like, what kind of box is that to put people in? But I guess as things kind of went on, like, I got diagnosed with dyslexia when I was 15, which was right before GCSEs, which was super helpful, and I really accredit that, me being able to, maximize my capabilities. And then life kind of continued, and I was always kind of, and maybe as Joshua said, he was out on a different wavelength. I was always a bit syncopated to everyone else. I just kind of got things like a little bit later, maybe the last one to laugh at a joke, or maybe the last one to be picked in a group activity. I just was a little bit out of it. And I think in lockdown was the only time I really spent time with myself and understood who I was and my habits, and what all these different symptoms I had were outside of life and outside of school. And in a really sad way, and a lot of women who have autism only get diagnosed because they have other symptoms like anorexia, anxiety and depression. And unfortunately, I was experiencing some of those at the time. And it was only really in that perfect storm I was able to say, hang on, like, what is the root cause of this? And what can I do to help myself? So yeah, I watched a video on a woman who had autism, and I thought, wow, like, that is so me. How am I, 18-year-old me, the first person to realize in my life that I have got this, neurodiversity, that, I've been surrounded by professionals. I was really lucky. I went to a private school. These people are supposed to be taught in, child development, and no one spotted it but me. And now it's a bit late, already. I was a bit upset because at this point in my life, I'm 18. I've lost so much time and support that I could have had in my whole entire education that could have really helped me in the future. Maybe I'd had more confidence. I was always the shy kid. Anyway, more towards Rolls-Royce now. So then it comes to 2020, and you know, I'm a girl in engineering now with autism. I'm thinking, right, like if now's the time to believe in myself, it's now. Like there's no one else telling me I can do it, and that's something I've really struggled with, actually, being a woman in engineering. People always telling me, like, are you sure you should be doing this? Are you sure you should be doing engineering? And now with this extra layer of, okay, well now you've got autism, like, are you sure you should be doing something so technical that you need broken down into bite-sized bits to understand? Oh, it's not looking good for you, is it? Anyway, so I see the advertisement for female undergraduate of the year, and I think, if I don't nominate myself or put myself forward for this, who will? No one else is going to put me forward, so I did. And you know, I was really lucky. I got to the top 20, top 10, and obviously eventually won. And I think in that moment I realized, like, I am not a female with autism in engineering. I'm me, and I'm so much more capable than any of these labels that other people may, you know, think hindering. And you know, in this situation, I was praised for doing actually what I think I'm supposed to do. You know, how is that? How is it something that's been so knocked back in my like ego is now being praised? It was a real like proud moment. It's something that you cannot argue with. I'll tell my cousins and uncles who are, you know, actually the ones who probably doubted me at first, saying, yeah, I did that, and no one can argue. And you know, same with probably Joshua and Tom, I got into Rolls-Royce. They don't expect anybody. So you know, all of these things are not hindrances, but they're strengths and they're skills. So more about Rolls-Royce. So I got to Rolls-Royce, and I was lucky enough to the previous summer to do an online virtual summer internship, and I actually didn't tell anyone about my autism because I was embarrassed and I was scared. But you know, this was a new year, new me. I just won this amazing award, and I was like, no, I am going to tell people, and I'm going to be confident, and I'm going to make sure it works for me. So I told my boss I had autism, and he said, Phoebe, that's great, like, let's talk about it. He set up a conversation. We spoke about ways he can support me, and obviously, so a little bit about me is more that I'm on the NHS waiting list for diagnosis with autism. It's 2 years long. It's going to take a while, but I think that's something that I want to do. I want to get diagnosed and get that, what some people may be afraid to call a label, because I think it's going to enable me to be so much more confident with my conviction and how I talk to people. So I haven't had a lot of support with my autism yet. And he said, how can I support you? And I was like, well, to be honest, I don't really know. And it was a really long journey over the summer to, you know, explore different techniques. We did a lot about, like, if I was given a task, we talk about it, he'd write it down, give me clear, broken down instructions, you know, did that work? You know, should I audio, like voice note meetings, would that be better? Or if I'm getting something explained, do I need to write it down on my end? You know, if I do that, am I really listening? And it was, you know, a really nice 10 weeks of actually the first time in a professional environment, I was able to, in a, you know, I felt in a safe space, really. Okay, this isn't working for me, let's try something else. And in the same way, like, working online is a whole different ballpark. And something I really struggle with my autism is like unexpected things, like something I can't plan for, like spontaneous plans are just not for me. But in work, you know, people call you just out of the blue. They need something, Phoebe, I'm going to call you now. And that's something that I had to say to my boss, like, that's something that I really, it makes me anxious, and it gives me a lot of anxiety. Just seeing your name pop up and not being ready or physically prepared, or, you know, having questions to ask. And he was like, okay, so he always made sure to give me 15 minutes advance warning on my phone calls, and that I'm able to produce the best out of me, really. And so through my time at Rolls-Royce, I did a presentation raising awareness for neurodiversity in Rolls-Royce, and it's actually really funny, like, echoes what Josh said about, there are actually a lot of engineers in Rolls-Royce who are already, like, maybe wouldn't say they're on the spectrum, but show a lot of autistic traits. And it's, you know, it's nice to see how I can relate to somebody, maybe not in age or in gender or even on neurodiversity like levels, but there are certain things like understanding problem solving, you know, easy to have a 3D model in your head. Like, that is so easy for me to do. And some people, you know, may not say they're autistic, but they are able to use that 3D, you know, side to show them. Anyway, I've got a little. So yeah, so that was really important to me. Another thing I did was a neurodivergent glossary for them to use, like, after I left Rolls-Royce, which was really important to me, because I think neurodiversity is a big social issue. And the more you can educate people and the more lasting and leaving impression I can give, the better. And another thing I did was I did a Vogue 70 questions as my end of internship placement video. And to me, that just kind of summed up everything it was. It was a, you know, a long lasting thing that I can leave with the company that talked about my autism, but also talked about how I used it to enable myself. And yeah, and that's kind of the one note I want to end on, how for me, my autism and dyslexia enables me. And if anything, you should really think that too. So thank you.
No, that's great. Thank you, Phoebe. I couldn't have said it better myself. So, no, that's a really nice way to end. And I think it's a nice segue from something that you mentioned around actually the fact that a lot of females get diagnosed later on in life, and it gets masked quite a lot into as moving on to chat to Rebecca, because you are also someone who got diagnosed later on in life. And so, yeah, if you were able to share a little bit about your experiences.
Yeah. Sorry, my voice is going. Got a frog in my throat. Yeah, I get quite emotional listening to everyone. I feel really emotional. Doesn't help medication's completely worn off by this time of day. But just, yeah, I got diagnosed probably nearly 2 years ago now. And I'm just, for like context, I'm 43 in January. So I've been working for 25 years. And the signs were always there, but, you know, I come from a generation, I suppose, where, to Josh's point, the ADHD kids were the naughty boys bouncing off the walls. And it's a stereotype that lives on today. I think you don't see that in yourself. You don't see the hyperactivity. I was quite shocked when I was diagnosed that I actually had the hyperactivity, because I was so exhausted by the time I was diagnosed that I didn't feel any hyperactivity whatsoever. I just spent every day just trying to get through the day. So it's emotional hearing everything. But I suppose where I got to was after, you know, 22, 3 years then, years of just trying to get on and just keep pushing myself forward, and knowing that I was so much better than where I was getting to, you know, like knowing there was something there that I'm being told constantly what you're not and what you are and what you're not and what you are. When you know different, you know it's different. And that was kind of like the story of my life. But I've been quite lucky that I think the outcomes for females, undiagnosed females with ADHD, are really poor. And, you know, a high proportion of them will end up in care system, prison system, addiction problems, and there are addiction problems and, you know, ADHD, autism, dyslexia across my family. I mean, both my, hopefully they're not on here, but both my parents suffer with alcohol problems, and it's just, yeah, well, they'd probably say they didn't, but they do. I think that, you know, kind of growing up in that kind of environment, if you've got any of those traits, they're gonna come out. But there's something in me, in my personality, I always think that is probably the impulse part, I don't know, that's just made me kind of kept going, no, you're all wrong, I'm right. But I mean, I think the thing that's really interesting about it is that kind of the polarity of you, the extremes, and the, you know, they say it's spiky, you have a spiky profile, and that's the bit that everyone is so scared of, and that's the bit in the working environment in particular that's really difficult, because those spikes are dangerous for people. You know, you get on top of a spike, it hurts, doesn't it? So, you know, I've been called arrogant, I've been called oversensitive, talk too much, shy. It's like, it's just, you know, every extreme that you can think of is basically, you know, to Josh's point, that's me, that is who I am. But so to get the label for me was liberating, because it was something that I didn't have before, and it was finally a reason as to why I can't prioritise for the life of me, and why, as somebody with so much experience and a really great creative brain, can't get stuff finished, and why I'm always late. They're actually, interestingly, I think Phoebe was talking about the kind of things that do come out in women in particular, but I see this in men as well. I know quite a few people now with males who are potentially undiagnosed with ADD, which means probably don't have the H so much or at all. And I forgot my point now, but yeah, So I was misdiagnosed with anxiety. I've been tried to be put on antidepressants many times over the years. And kind of struggled with physical illnesses. And I think I was kind of going through that, and maybe in my 20s and 30s in particular, which is before I had kids. And purposely stayed on my own and didn't have kids, and because, you know, why would you when you don't feel like you can even look after yourself? And you kind of, yeah, you to get the label to go, actually, I knew I wasn't anxious. I knew that wasn't me. I know I love life. I love being alive. I really do love being alive. I find it the most exciting thing. And now taking medication, I can be a lot of the things that I always knew I was but couldn't be. So more outgoing, more sociable, in knowing that, you know, the reason that I used to drink a lot when I went out is because I couldn't cope with the environment. I couldn't cope with all the inputs from everywhere, you know, all of the noise and the all the different things going on, you know, just actually knowing that is so liberating. And just getting past all those stereotypes and really digging into it. I think the last 18 months for me has been a particularly deep journey, because I've had to reframe a lot of my perspectives on life and a lot of the coping mechanisms that I'd built up over the years. So people would think I was never late because I had like a really good system not to be late, but that took a lot of energy, you know. So now I choose to be late. And now in an environment like Rolls-Royce, in a role like mine, because I'm in a leadership position at Rolls-Royce, though I use that word lightly because I'm really a child, you know, like that you kind of being late, that is just almost a big no-no. It's like it's tardiness, isn't it? It's like, you know, it's not looked at, I would assume, as a good thing. So I use the label quite prolifically because I've had to make these conscious choices around which of those tools and those systems I'm not going to use anymore. And I think that I can do that. And I think that's kind of where we need to get to in any working culture, to truly kind of be inclusive for people on the end of the cognitive spectrum. But yeah, that I think that the spikiness is what led to my diagnosis. And also it was a video, I watched a documentary. I was ill just before lockdown, and I watched this documentary and I'm like, oh my God, that's me. And all the things that I thought I might be, mad, serial killer, loads of different things, you know, and I watched this documentary, and even though it was in my family, and I just went, oh my God, that's me. It's like, you just know. But then you don't know what to do with that, and you certainly don't know what to do with that work. And I just finished studying, so I'm here as well as a graduate, a quite recent graduate. I graduated in 2020. I went straight in to do a master's in coaching because I got into coaching because I'd spent most of my life trying to work out how to be, let's say, normal, you know, not me, or more like everyone else, or being able to try and do things. So coaching is obviously one of those things that I've been through many times, but it never worked for me, and I couldn't work out why. So I went to study coaching, and it was very interesting. It's all the things that I love and I'm interested in, and very creative, or can be very creative. And I kind of, and when I got diagnosed, I was thinking, I can't have ADHD because, like, I got a master's and I got a distinction. I got 84% in my dissertation, and this is somebody who can't stay awake in a lecture. Like, I spent half my A-levels asleep or trying to keep my eyes open, and I walked out of them in the end. I didn't finish my A-levels. So I took an apprenticeship as an admin assistant, like an office junior, when I was 17. And I kind of like thought, oh, how did I do that? And I think that's the hyper focus. You know, that hyper focus is actually incredibly good in an environment that's about innovation, because you need someone to have that vision. You need someone to be able to see something that other people don't see, and not necessarily be able to communicate it well, and not necessarily be able to get it over the line. That doesn't really matter. But if you don't see it in the first place, you can't do all those other bits. So for me, that is the true kind of value in our organisation, or in any organisation, but particularly in ours, where we're trying to solve such massive world issues that, you know, neurodiverse people at our end of the spectrum definitely massively care about, because we are only driven by passion and purpose. We're not driven by reward. We don't have the same kind of social systems that everyone else has. So, you know, they need people like us to be doing that kind of stuff. I mean, that's why we're here today. That's why we're having this conversation, because people like us are doing this kind of stuff, you know, and that's kind of why I'm here. But I'm also I'm a graduate. That I must make sure that everyone, and I was an apprentice. I did finish that. I got NVQ level 3 in administration.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you. And before we move on to Thomas, I just want to touch on quickly with you about Open and your role within our employee resource group.
Yeah. So I'm a co-chair with Open, which is quite funny because I think that means normally you're quite organising stuff, but that's not really working out very well. Josh works really closely on the committee, and he's one of the neurodiversity leads. So between Josh, a bit of me, not so much these days, I just talk about it a lot, and Andy Parker, who is, I can't remember what his job is now, Josh. He's in North Squared, I think, isn't he? We are looking at how we bring neurodiversity programs into Rolls-Royce to do what we're talking about, to solve some of these problems and to think about things differently. So obviously one of the first stages of that was working already with Undergraduate of the Year. We had the Female Undergraduate of the Year now for many years, which Phoebe's come through, and we also put in place, I say we, meaning Ellie, massively Ellie, put in place another one last year around adversity, which was more around social mobility, so people that have had to face barriers to get where they are. A lot of neurodiverse people came through that assessment centre, and we saw that people were really impressed by those people, by their stories, but also by their experiences and how that had defined how they are and how they do things and how they see things. And we found out that there wasn't a neurodiversity Undergraduate of the Year. So we're like, well, that's crazy. Let's do a neurodiversity one. It's a priority for Rolls-Royce. It's a priority in terms of having, I suppose, for two reasons: the innovation side of things, but also from an inclusion perspective. We quite openly say we're building an inclusive culture. We're not there yet. No one's there yet. We've got a long way to go. We've got a lot of re-educating to do. We've got a lot of, barriers to knock down like anywhere else. But, we are committed as an organisation to neurodiversity and to the kind of value of talent that is neurodivergent, let's say, and thinks in a neurodivergent way. So the Undergraduate of the Year is the first kind of, I would say stab, I don't know if that's the most appropriate word, but the first stab at trying to bring in a dedicated pool of neurodiverse talent and not just try and connect all the neurodiverse talent that we have. I mean, 20% of the world fit in this group. That's potentially 20% of Rolls-Royce, to the other guys' points, probably higher. And we need to make sure those people are supported to do what they're good at and not drugged down by the things that they're never going to be good at, because actually all organisations are still operating on this kind of job specification that is like a list of things that no one person is anyway, but it's designed around what people would like one person to come in and do, and neurodiverse people in particular don't fit into that box. They will, and the frameworks that sit all around that, to assess how well people are doing, whether they be promoted, whether they, they're high potential talent or whatever the different frameworks are, they are not designed for people in our group to easily get through. So we're looking at all of that as part of this, and it's a really good place to start with a younger group of people, or graduates or apprentices or whoever it is that can tell us these things, and from a generation as well where they're more likely to tell us these things and be much more aware of who they are and why they are the way they are than probably I ever was, and still I'm not most of the time. I just think I'm brilliant, actually, so I'm quite happy to stick with that one.
It's a good place for us to pause.
Yeah. The question though is the question. I don't know what the question was.
Yeah, no, you did answer the question. No, it's perfect. Thank you, Rebecca. And if anyone's got any more questions on anything like that, please feel free to post them in the chat, and we will get to them in a minute. But we are going to go over to Tom now, our final panel member, who's one of our apprentices, to hear from him. So welcome, Tom. Thanks for joining us.
Hiya, my name is Tom. Like Kelly just said, I'm a third-year apprentice currently in the Materials Lab scheme, which is a degree scheme. And I've come straight out of my A-levels and just started in the apprenticeship. I mean, I'd say the transition was fairly comfortable from sixth form to college, because the first year was just fairly college based anyway. It was all practical skills. But over the summer before I started, I got diagnosed, because I've always got extra time and exams and things like that, but I didn't really know what it was, and nor did my teachers. Thinking about it, in primary school, I just thought it was a bit thick, to be honest, and I just thought I had a mental block and wasn't just particularly bright, which wasn't the most brilliant way of sort of treating things. But as I sort of moved up through school, I found out that I was actually fairly intelligent, at least, and I was just having struggles with learning in general. But after I had my diagnosis, I found out I had a processing disorder, which basically means my neurons are a bit slow, and I struggle processing information, storing it, and then retrieving it afterwards. So that basically meant that my sort of conversation flow isn't particularly brilliant, nor is my vocabulary particularly wide. And I've found that because of that, it's just meant that I've had to constantly try and make sure for exams and things like that, I'm constantly revising as much as I can and all that kind of stuff, because I was always doing that anyway. Just trying to keep all that information, just keep cramming it in, try and make sure I've got as much as possible. But for me, being diagnosed was quite useful, because it enabled me to find out a lot more about the stuff that I was struggling with, and sort of play to my strengths, if you like. Because for me, not being able to, struggling keeping information in my head has made my organisational skills a lot better, because it just had to be. So like note taking, making sure that I'm always on time and things like that, it's just sort of really had to be kept up with, because otherwise I just wouldn't manage in a work environment, especially with the amount of workload that I do have. It's just been, it's been quite provided a challenge, but I'm sort of like, I'm really sort of taking it in my stride and things like that, because just the amount of workload, just it's a lot of a struggle. And but sorry, I'm not.
No, that's fine. No. But do you think through your apprenticeship being able to play to your strengths at all? Do you think it's played to some of the things that you're actually you're better at?
I mean, I'd say so. So like I'm not sort of like, my communication skills aren't brilliant, but then sort of my analytical skills are a lot better. So once I've been given a task, I've really excelled at it, and I'll quite happily just keep pushing it forward and forward, and I've not really had to have maybe as much monitoring as you'd expect for an apprentice. That's what I've had feedback wise anyway. As soon as I've been given something, I'll just run with it, and I've found that's been really quite beneficial to me, especially in recent projects where I've had to manage more people, which has certainly been difficult, but it's improved my communication skills vastly, which is something that, like I said, I've struggled with previously.
Yeah, and do you think you found, because I guess some people say actually doing an apprenticeship is sometimes harder than going to university because you've got to juggle multiple factors. How have you found that, being someone?
I mean, I've always had to cope with just the amount of workload and things like that, but I found making sure that the communication with the university and my manager and my placement leaders, and making sure that they're aware as possible of the things that I struggle with and the way I cope with everything is probably the best way I've managed to deal with it. But university wise, it's just making sure that all of my module leaders and things like that are aware that I need extra time, and getting them to forward lecture notes to me so I can make notes in my own time, because I can't for the life of me take notes in like a 2-hour lecture. It'll probably take me about 4 hours to go through it in my own time. So that's the main way I've managed with that. But it's just sort of making sure that you've got those strategies in place to almost cope with what you're struggling with in the environments that you may not be as comfortable with, and it's sort of making sure that everybody's aware so that they can help you as much as you can.
Yeah. Yeah, and do you find, Tom, this actually segues me perfectly into something that I want to ask you, because I hear in my role quite a lot of the time that sometimes people are quite nervous about disclosing to us that they've got a neurodiverse condition during the process or once they start. Have you found the fact that because you've been able to tell us that it's actually then been a benefit for you?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't particularly scared of telling people what it was, mainly because I didn't find out until recently. But I found that telling people, just making sure they're aware of what a processing disorder is and how I struggle, is quite beneficial. I'm still trying to work out a lot of what it means and how I can manage, apart from the ways that I've always been doing. But sort of just
Right.
what was said earlier, just having that label has been quite beneficial because I've been able to look up into what issues I'm likely to face and sort of how I can prepare myself to cope with that. And also it's also aided in communicating what potential things that could be put in place to help me throughout each placement, especially with sort of dancing about the business as much as I am. It's quite difficult making sure that I settle in well each placement, because they're only 4 months long, and it's sort of, especially recently with working from home as much as I am, organizational skills have been quite difficult because I'm quite easily distracted by things, especially when I'm just sort of sat in my room all day. Can sometimes be quite difficult to focus or just keep track and making sure that I'm on top of things. Did it answer that question?
Yes, no, you did. Yeah, no, that's really great. So I think we'll move over to our Q&A now. So I can see that there's some questions starting to come through on the chat, but if anyone's got anything they'd like to ask, either direct it at one of our panelists or feel free to kind of just post it in there and then we can ask away. But the first question that's come through is from someone who has joined us who has ADHD and dyslexia. And they've asked, what sort of tips do you have for productivity? So Josh, I don't know if you've got anything to say to this first.
Yeah, I do. I would say that like something as basic as like getting to bed on time and eating protein and like exercising, like stuff like that, like really basic stuff. Because I think obviously with ADHD, it's quite easy to like push forward your bedtime because we're like super like hyperactive, especially during the night. Like I don't know why. It's quite usual to have like a push forward circadian rhythm or something like that. But if you try and like keep that discipline, it's really important because I think it really affects like all your focus and organization. And I think you can probably tell right now I'm quite sleep deprived, but but so it's like something I'm trying to like focus on right now because I think it's like actually really important and it does make a massive difference. And I think obviously keeping like your like surfaces really clear as well, like as much as possible, because clutter can obviously build up really quickly, like if you're just being messy and not paying attention and things like that. So you want to kind of make sure that doesn't happen because it kind of does overwhelm you quite quickly. And then like using like visual systems of organization, so like not keeping things tucked away because you will forget about them. So like if it's something you need to remember, like having it out there. Like a lot of people use post-it notes, I don't really, but they are useful for a lot of people. And I try and keep things like out and open that I'm sort of like are useful to me and that I do have to remember as much as possible. And what else? Oh yeah, like not like kind of being like, oh, I don't need to write down what I need to do. Like I can't explain it, but like having like a to-do list because he's like, no, I don't need to have a to-do list, but actually don't let yourself be prideful like that, but always try and break things down, like do this and tick things off, because then that feedback loop gives a dopamine which helps you like carry on with the task and keep track of the task, and then you just do things quicker if you have that. So so just kind of those bits of discipline I think have been the most effective for me. So yeah, but I don't always do them. So
no, that's great. Rebecca, I don't know if you've got anything else to add on the ADHD.
I would say Josh is like the expert on this because all the things he's listing are the things that I struggle to do, don't know I should do, but I get bored, think, oh, that's boring. I really want to work at 3 a.m. I enjoy it. I do enjoy it, but I also have a child that wakes up at 7, so I don't enjoy that. I think that the thing that for me, alongside all the things Josh said, which are really great ones, definitely the protein, because that makes a huge difference. I find it easier now to go with my cycle, which is hyper focus, work 17-hour days because I've got to, because I can't sleep anyway because my brain's going crazy, and even if I try, I still can't. I don't know if it's just me. And then know that you're gonna hit a wall. I think that's easier in some jobs though than it is in others. It's easier said than done, but I think anyone that's studying is probably studying like that already, so they know that cycle really well. And I think the more you can work with whoever your managers or whoever's supporting you on a program to communicate that and explain that, the more that you can get the support around some of those natural rhythms that you sometimes do need to follow, particularly if you're working on a placement that you're super interested in. Like you say, with Tom saying, you're there maybe 3 or 4 months. If you're really into it and it's what you really love, you want to be spending your time on it because you're getting that reward there as well. So that's what I'd say. But I think on the processing side, because I struggle with a lot of processing stuff, particularly like accessing words and processing, I have really clear visual pictures in my head that I can't get down on paper. And this is to Ellie's strength, so you might want to answer this from a dyslexia perspective, but I found working really closely with Ellie, she's really good at the things I'm not, but she gets what I'm trying to do, so I don't have to like over explain something that she's thinking, what the hell are you on about, which you do get quite a lot of the time. I can kind of communicate something and you can do the bits that I can't. And so I think teaming up with other people with different balance of neurodivergent traits, if you like, is a really great thing to do. And I think the same with Andy Parker when we work on the stuff in open. Josh and I are probably really similar in that we'll go, oh yeah, really great idea, let's now not do anything, maybe. I don't know, I'm not talking to you, Josh, but that's definitely what I do. And then Andy, who has autism, will get stuff done and drive it forward, and that works really well. Though sometimes I feel like he's doing all the work. That's probably the last tip. Don't feel guilty because you can't do it.
I think what you've just said links really nicely actually to another question that's just come through around what it's like working with people who are neurodiverse, or have any of you got experiences where actually you're working with someone who has also got a neurodiverse condition that's then different to yours, or have you managed someone with a neurodiverse condition, and how does that kind of play out? Phoebe, I can see you nodding, so I don't know if you've got anything you want to say.
Yeah, so I definitely can. So over the summer, there was a 2-week sprint project that the summer interns got to do, and I worked with this amazing guy called Cyrus, whose brain worked at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and he often let us know that he has an IQ of something ridiculous, like 300 in a million or something, something way off the sky. Isaac Newton didn't even have an IQ that big. But it was interesting because I often think about how I work so much that you forget that people are like cogs, and it's all about the way you fit together. And sometimes you meet people who are just, okay, so it's not only you adjusting to the way I work, but I am now going to adjust to the way you work. And often hear the phrase like, you've got to manage your manager, but not that, you've got to manage other people too, and like understand that like, for example, in his case, he was not very forthcoming in Teams meetings, but at the end of the day, he came up with this massive Word document for our whole project that no one asked him to do. And you think, wow, like, and I have to say this, like, I was very close to having a few harsh words with him about his, attendance in the meetings. But actually, like, I'm really glad I bit my tongue, because it wasn't even that, but I didn't understand the way he worked. And it took him, producing such amazing work. Oh my gosh, I completely didn't appreciate that people work differently to the way I do, and just because I feel one way doesn't mean somebody else doesn't. So yeah, I do have experience with people working with other neurodivergent issues, and I think the one thing that always sticks out to me is that I'm different, so everyone else is different. Not that just because I'm neurodiverse, it's only me that has this one issue. It's everyone else has the same right to be understood and accepted. So yeah, that's that.
Yeah, no, I really like your analogy of the cogs. I think that's
I like the cogs. And I just build on that. It's really interesting actually, because I have managed people that have been diagnosed before I was, and I've obviously worked with people. And I think the biggest challenge for me is being a manager with it, because that must be an absolute nightmare for people that work with with me. They say not, but I think it must be. But one thing that I think that part about how you see it I don't think it makes you any better at it because you are also a neurodiverse person. I think it actually probably makes you worse because we can only learn through our own experiences, and we only understand our own experiences more than anybody else. That's, you know, a learning trait, isn't it? So some of it you can relate to, but it actually, you want people around you that are not like you, because you don't want more of you, because you get nowhere. Like, you literally get nowhere. So I think that cogs piece is really critical, and actually really valuing the people that actually you probably find really tricky to work with, that want to know all the detail and all the bits, and you're like, oh my god, why are you getting obsessed with that right now? Because I'm over here and you're obsessed with that. You know, how are we going to actually do this bit, and who cares? I know it gets a bit like that. And I think that that's really important to kind of keep pulling yourself back to why you need that. And that's back to the whole business case for diversity, isn't it? You need everything.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that's great. Hopefully that answers the question that whoever sent it in. Now, Tom, I've got a good one here for you. It's quite a long question, so I'm just deciphering it. But we've got someone who is currently studying a material laboratory foundation year, I think at Loughborough University, and they've been looking at the MATLab's degree apprenticeship, and they're asking whether you think that because of being neurodiverse and being quite a visual learner, or someone that needs kind of tangible things, whether an apprenticeship actually suits that style better than just going to university full time.
Massively, to be honest. I've found that just doing placements has taught me far more about the industry and the way how we operate in your job, rather than just university. I mean, university is brilliant for learning theory and some practical aspects, but the only way you're going to learn properly how to implement your skills is through placements. And I've found that just because of the way how I work, I'd really struggle just doing university work, because I can't put all the information that I've got just by doing university into the application. I almost have to have that interface between the two constantly. So yeah, I'd massively advise going for an apprenticeship route. I'd really struggle if I did university. And the amount of extra skills that you learn that are just brilliant for to be honest, I'll say any career that you're dealing with, whether it's, and just learning how to manage yourself properly and interact with others is really, I've learned far more skills by being on an apprenticeship than just doing university on its own.
Well,
I think the only reason I got my degree is because I've been doing the work before. I got through a degree, going to uni at 18. I knew that at the time, I suppose, as well. But I would echo the same thing, having done both. Learning by doing is really useful.
And I guess, have you found that too, Phoebe, with the fact that you've done a summer internship with us, and then you've got other internships and things lined up, and you've done kind of the practical different projects? Has that helped you as well in your style of learning?
Yeah, no, it's definitely, you forget how critical it is to see what's happening in front of you. I mean, for my summer internship, it was 10 weeks long. I spent 2 face-to-face, and I mean, just tell you, like, the way everything clicked into place when I spent that time on site and learning about it face-to-face, it's crazy. And I think that's something that is maybe the danger of hybrid learning. And this is not a Rolls-Royce problem. This is a new modern age problem. How are we going to help the people that are neurodivergent to understand and get that interaction with, what the actual engine and, the product on site, rather than what's, typing away at a graph at home. And I think, that's something that we're really going to have to think about in the next 2 to 5 years. So
I think if you're in like a business role, you need that as much as well, because
Definitely.
you're doing it. And I think that's one thing I struggled with. I mean, I was working at Rolls-Royce before the pandemic hit, but I had never have actually gone around the manufacturing side of things, which is something I wanted to do, and it's really important for me. I've learned a lot from talking to people since, but I really do feel sometimes like I've missed out on that really truly understanding. But luckily I've got a lot of engineering people in my extended family that I've picked on. So that's helped get some context.
Well, no, that's really great. Now we've got a question that's come through that I guess I could probably answer from my role. I think it'd be interesting to hear what your guys' thoughts are too. And I apologise, Josh has slightly dropped off, so we're trying to get back on. But this question is, what are the things that are important for the recruiters at Rolls-Royce, and what are the things that they're looking for when you apply for a role? So what would you guys say? And then I'm happy to add my my final bit at the end.
That's a good question. I'm going to probably say the same thing as you, Ellie, so I'm not going to say.
Tom, you go. What were you going to say?
I'd say primarily just enthusiasm for the job role. I mean, obviously having good grades is good, but if you've got no interest in the subject itself, they're not going to recruit you at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say enthusiasm, and also just being yourself, being honest with the employer about what you want to get out of it, and then just display an interest. I think that's the main thing, and understanding the subject matter and the business as itself. So I remember in my interview day, in the morning I had to basically explain how the business functioned in one interview, and then the other one I had to explain how all the different turbojets worked fundamentally, and that's sort of trying to demonstrate how well you understand the products that we produce and how the business functions as a whole. And then in the afternoon, they also like to see how well you interact with others. So I remember we had like a 4-hour session where we had to program a robot to go around this little obstacle course. And it wasn't really to see whether you could do it or not. It was more to see how well you interacted with others as a team and how you played to everybody. Strengths and everything like that, and they weren't looking for somebody just to take charge and delegate all the work. They were basically making sure that everybody played to their strengths and functioned properly to get the job done.
Yeah. Well, Josh, we were just chatting about the things that the recruiters look for, or the things that you should focus on during the application process. So I don't know if you've got anything to add from a graduate perspective.
Yeah, so I can speak a bit about my assessment centre. So in mine, basically I had to speak about like how the engine worked, essentially. Like, so I guess obviously understanding how jet engines work is really important for the Rolls-Royce recruitment process, and also like for me joining Rolls-Royce control systems, also how the feedback control system works with that. So doing all the research you can on that would be really helpful. Obviously, me with ADHD, I sort of hyper focused on it and just like learn everything about it ever that I could, and I really impressed the interviewer at the interview, and then it got to the point where I didn't know anything. He just kept asking me why this, why that, and he kind of kept challenging me to see like how far I could go, and then I didn't really know, but I knew it was good to just show like you had ideas. So he just kept asking why, and then, oh, maybe it's something like this, and and then like he was like, well, how would that work, and how would that work, and I literally, he just kept going and going and going and going like 20 times, and he was just like, oh, and he just like didn't expect me to keep coming up with ideas, and it was like a totally like unfeasible thing. I think it was like an optic way of like measuring like fuel flow or something like that, which obviously don't actually do it, but yes, so yeah, that's. Yeah, so just kind of like challenging yourself and like not being afraid to sort of give crazy ideas when you don't know. I think that is kind of like they want to see that you like problem solving, and that you kind of like what Rolls-Royce does. So
yeah, that's great. Phoebe, I don't know if you've got anything to add.
Yeah, I guess like the one thing that I can add to that is that I think to get here, and you've got to jump through certain hoops. Maybe you do it, with the correct studies, with studying the respective field, be interested in Rolls-Royce. But Rolls-Royce will, they'll knock out everyone else who's not maybe studying the relevant degree or not got the right qualifications. Then you're left with a pool of people, right? And now you've got to think about what makes you stand out, and what have you done that maybe is just a little bit beyond your mates, just a little, something a little bit of pizzazz, a little bit on the side that you're carrying around, like, yeah, look at me, I did this. And that's something that makes you interesting. And Rolls-Royce wants to know what you've done beyond your education. What have you done to push the boundaries a little bit? something that I talked about in my interview was how I was part of a company called Action Tutoring, who gave tutoring to children during lockdown who were from disadvantaged schools. And it was nothing to do with engineering. It was only to do with maths, but I was able to communicate. I was able to be proactive. I was made to make use of my time that otherwise would have just gone to waste. And I think that was actually a major talking point for me. And, you know, if you don't have the work experience because the last 2 years, what have you done? Did you bought a bike? You know, all this kind of stuff that actually makes you a person, has a bit of pizzazz. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Yeah, no, definitely. I don't need to say anything now. You've all covered everything perfectly for me. But I think the
I've got one.
Go on, what were you going to say, Rebecca?
Phoebe kind of said it, but I've got to say it my way, obviously, as well. So I was never that person that had done loads of extra things because, like, life's too hard in the first place in my head. So I haven't got time for those things as much as I'd love to. But I think that there's a couple of really key things. One is asking for adjustment. So as someone with ADHD, know what the interview questions are going to be is the most valuable thing you can ever do, because you're only ever going to answer the question you want with what you want to say. Not, you know, otherwise you're going to be working really hard to pull yourself back. You don't remember the questions with the working memory issues. And I think that's really important, that it's okay to ask for adjustments. If that's an adjustment that would help you, you should ask for it, number one. And then you can actually prepare what you need to actually answer the question. Because I don't think I've ever been in an interview in my entire life and answered any of the questions I've asked me. When I've done well in interviews, it's just been because they've found this extra pizzazz, which has been my creativity or bringing in my life experiences to understand or demonstrate a point. Because I think that's one thing that neurodivergent people do really well, is, like, you know, taking everything around you and make sense of everything as kind of one thing, if you like. And it doesn't have to just be about an engine or this. So, for example, I know that I'm really good at Lego. I'm not an engineer, but I know that kind of interest in Lego and building things and anything kind of with my hands and making stuff, if I was going into an apprenticeship now in engineering, which I probably would do, to be honest, because it's really fun, looks really fun, I would talk about that, because that's what makes me interested in how things come together. And, you know, you talked about material science there. That is so interesting because of how things work. So I think you can talk about things in that way as well, and you just need to know why it is that those things motivate you.
Yeah, and I think that's the most important thing. I think from our perspective, we want to see what it is that makes you you, and what it is that gets you up out of bed in the morning. At the end of the day, we're going to spend an awful lot of time at work in our lives. And so you've got to have a passion and an interest for what it is you're doing, or the industry that you're working in, or the sector. And I guess it does. I think it's easy if you're an engineer or you're really interested in engineering and sustainability, and that's why you want to come and work at Rolls-Royce. But we also have business opportunities and business programs. And so have a think about what it is about our organisation. Is it our purpose? Is it our values? What is it that kind of resonates with you? And where do you think you can kind of make a difference, or give yourself that, as Phoebe says, that kind of pizzazz, that sparkle that kind of gives you that get up and go. So yeah, that's my biggest tip, is to really think about what it is that motivates you, because that is what makes you unique, and then that's what we want to see and hear from in the assessment process. So yeah. So next question, I really like this question. Do you have any examples on how you've used your neurodiverse diagnosis or condition to your advantage, and how do you play to your strengths? So Josh, do you want to go first on that one?
Yeah, so an example would be, so for my industrial placement, I worked in systems test, which is basically just for the control system software, writing tests for the rig, basically, which is like a computer simulation of the engine. And it's just like writing programming code, but it's like really simple programming code, but you only get limited time on the rig, and that's kind of like the main thing that like takes up a lot of time, is the fact that you have to slot in the time to make sure your test works. It's the only way you can actually test your tests, and and then like find information to put in the test. So I kind of like realized there's a few like complexity, simplicity problems that didn't make any sense, and that it kind of wasn't the best way to do it. And then so when I came back and I had the opportunity to work on the ecosystem project, I had like this like crazy idea. Well, first thing I was given was like to have like an Excel spreadsheet and then generate all the scripts from the spreadsheet or something like that. And essentially I turned that idea like into, like I first did that really quickly because I'm just good at programming, and then with that extra time I like turned it into a whole graphical user interface, like just because I was like, yeah, but then you could do this and then you can also do this, and I just got super obsessed with it, and then like added all this functionality, and then and I just created like a whole new way of doing the testing, and then like in like a super small amount of time, and it was like people were looking at me like, how is he doing this in the time he has, kind of thing. And that obviously I got it, and basically it's like done. It's like 99% done. And there's like still a little bits I like have to do to clean it up to make it so that's the thing that people use now. But I mean, the 1% is always a little bit hard for me to get that over the line. But yeah, so yeah, and that was amazing feedback for me, and it was a really great experience. And in that process, I learned a whole new programming language, like how to write apps and how to write websites, and because it was all together. So that's kind of like, it's just sort of having this ability to just not care about how complicated something is, because you don't even understand how complicated or how long it's going to be. You just do it because it's just fun and interesting. And yeah, so that's sort of how it's helped me, and it continues to help me whenever I can find something that I'm like super like interested in, find really cool, and then yeah, so I look for that.
You're on mute, Ellie.
Sorry, I muted myself because I was having a drink and I thought you don't want to hear me to drink. I'm doing the most spoken thing in lockdown of you're on mute. Yeah, I was just saying, I think it's really nice that you said that it's about trying to find that little bit that is you, and that little bit that motivates you, or that little bit that kind of excites you. Is that something that you found too, Phoebe?
Yeah, sorry. We have to repeat the question because I got a bit lost in what Josh was saying.
No, that's fine. It was, have you ever kind of used your neurodiverse diagnosis to your advantage, or do you play to your strengths with it?
Every day. So I think one thing that really stands out for me is that I'm like really aesthetic, as in I really like things to look good. And I remember like doing my PowerPoint on my end of internship presentation and my neurodiversity presentation. A lot of the feedback I got was just, Phoebe, like how you're so creative in the way that I make information like approachable and easy to absorb and aesthetic to look at. And I think that's something that I use, that's a skill I use all the time, because it's something that I struggle with so much. When you make a PowerPoint and it looks like this, oh, you can't even see, that's such a bad example. It looks like this. Nothing to me is appealing about that. And so anything I produce, all the work I like to give, is so easily absorbed and looked at and understandable and approachable, because to me, that's what makes life enjoyable. And, you know, work have a purpose is, you know, and giving someone an output that actually is easy to digest in one look and you can understand in 5 seconds, rather than having to, you know, laboriously look through a whole, you know, paragraph upon paragraph of work. So yeah, that's how I use my neurodiverse issue. I make things digestible, but in a more creative and beautiful way.
Do you know what? I totally agree with you, because I'm all down for Rebecca will nod at this. I like a good looking slide, and I think it just makes things so much easier, I think, when you're trying to kind of communicate messages to people. So yeah,
it comes down to communication completely.
Tom, what about you? Do you have anything to add?
I mean, the main thing was just finding something that I was really interested in and just running with it. But also there's sort of a little sort of bit of laziness in me that makes me want to make my life as easy as possible. And that often makes me go down quite convoluted avenues to try and make my work life as easy as possible. But obviously then, so if I'm working on a project, that's made me end up going like automating data processing and things like that, or and just basically, just because I struggle processing information and things like that, just making everything as automated as possible in my work life. So then it's made it miles easier, and then everybody else's life easier as well. But yeah,
that's a good one. Rebecca?
Was it using it to my advantage? I think
Yeah.
I do all the time, but I really enjoy it because you can just be yourself, which is really nice. So, but I think there's a couple of things. One is I think you were probably on a call once when I was, come out with a different perspective on something, and I said, "Oh, I'm sorry," because I often feel like you're making people's life difficult, because you really are, actually, because you're making people think about something that they probably thought they had an answer to, which they maybe don't have the right answer to, or the only answer to, whichever way you want to look at it. And someone said, "But it's great, Rebecca, because what you do is you come into this conversation and you basically lob a big grenade in the middle of it, and we all think about something we never thought about before." And I think that's kind of what I do, using it to my advantage. And then that's what people use you for. They learn what you're good at, and that can have negative sides, I'm sure, as well, whether you don't get invited to some conversations because they just want to get something done. I think that's okay, as long as the intention's good. Some things don't need the grenade throwing in the middle of them. They don't need disrupting, they don't need changing. But yeah, I think that's probably my biggest one. And there was a massive corporate saying, particularly in the HR world, which is my main background, about 10-15 years ago, I think I first heard it, which that 80% is good enough. I think they say everywhere, but 80% is good enough. 80% is not good enough for me. No, it's not. 80% is boring. I don't want to do 80% because then I wouldn't come to work every day. So I think I use it to my advantage to, like you're doing, Phoebe talked about it aesthetically, Josh, in terms of, following what he's really interested in and coming up with something really different. I think you've got to kind of go with that, and you can use it to your advantage then to kind of enjoy yourself, enjoy yourself at work, because you don't have to do the 80%. If you try and stick to that, then yeah, you're not going to be doing what you're good at, I think. I don't even know if that actually is what I meant to say, but
well, no, there's no right or wrong answer. So.
No, I know,
Yeah.
but I'm trying to think if that's actually the point I was trying to make. I don't know. I've no idea, but that is one of my bugbears. So I think I use it to my advantage to disrupt, but not for the sake of it, because some things don't need disrupting. That's fine. That's good.
Yeah, and I think on the reverse, so this is an interesting question that someone's asked, and please only kind of share things that you're comfortable with sharing, but has anyone felt that their diagnosis has had the opposite effect and kind of either harmed them or given them something that's made them struggle more compared to their peers or their colleagues in a certain way or environment? And I guess, how have you then overcome that?
I mean, I think it would be really naive to say no. Of course, it's harmed you, but I think for me personally, for all the harm it's done a lot more good. It's done a lot of harm in that I think it sounds really silly me saying, I mean, I've got quite a creative job, which is good, because otherwise I'd be really struggling, I suppose. But I think I could have got a lot further if I didn't have ADHD, but then I wouldn't have the brain I've got, so I probably wouldn't. So I think you can kind of look at it from both sides. And I think I saw the question in the chat, actually. There was wasn't there something around time in there? Yeah, I saw that and I thought, oh, that's a really interesting question. Can I do that because of my job? If I was coming in now as an apprentice or a graduate as an intern, would that be okay? I don't know the answer to that. The other guys will probably be able to shed some light on that, but I think that if you know that something is taking your energy and the only reason to do it is to meet some kind of social norm that doesn't work for you, then you need to feel comfortable to communicate that. And if you're not listened to, you need to feel comfortable to reach out to people who do understand it, which is why we have things like the employee resource groups, because you've got a support network outside of your role or your team or your program to do that. And there are people at many levels of the organisation that will support you and will have conversations on your behalf if that's needed. So I think you've got to just kind of, I wouldn't say don't worry about those things, but make sure that you are using all the resources available to help you communicate those things or get them communicated on your behalf, because I think these things are not always that important. But it's very easy for me to say that in the position I'm in now. If it was 20 years ago, I would have spent all my energy trying to be, well, I did, trying to be on time, trying not to interrupt, trying not to keep talking, blah, blah, blah. Try not to jump around, because we're tied to a screen all day and really you want to run around the garden.
And I guess for me, the word harm is, I guess it then it's up to individuals to interpret the language that they want to use. But I would always say that kind of puts it in a negative perspective, whereas I would always say think about it as it's just something that you may struggle with more than another individual, but everyone has their own kind of struggles, so it's just working out those coping mechanisms for you, as I guess we talked about earlier. So I'm conscious of time, and that we've had loads of questions coming through. I don't know if any of you just got any kind of final thoughts or kind of bits of advice or anything you'd like to say, just to for us to, before we finish, to leave on. I can see Phoebe looking.
Yeah, I definitely do. I think something that I got told the other day, which has really resonated with me and has actually changed a lot of the way I approach things, is that neurodiversity is an explanation, not an excuse. And in talking about especially in discrimination, I know that, you know, I've maybe been in a task, delegated the boring task or the admin task. I've been delegated health and safety way too many times in a group project, just because it was deemed as all I could really do. That's just not the case. And you know, as what Rebecca was saying, maybe to the girl that asked the question or boy who asked the question about being late, it's not an excuse, it's an explanation. Use it and learn. I think you can only ever strive to do better. As long as you've got the attitude of I'm using it, I'm overcoming it, and this is why, you'll never be held back. And I think that's what, like, you know, that's what I would like to end on. Yeah,
that's a really nice way to end. Tom, do you have any kind of final words of wisdom?
Not entirely sure. I mean, to be honest, if you just apply and just give it your all, be yourself when you're doing it, and just make sure that, because you're only able to apply to one apprenticeship scheme per year, just make sure that that's the one that you definitely want to go for. I mean, there's always the opportunity for like being realigned. So I think I was the only person who actually got in on my materials scheme, and then the other two apprentices came in through the engineering scheme and the NDT scheme. There's always opportunity for that, but just make sure that what you're going for is exactly what you want to do, and that you're properly interested in it, because there's no way how you're going to get through the amount of work that you've got to do if you don't care about it enough. But yeah, that's about it.
Bro. Rebecca, anything to add?
Yeah, I've got, well, it's like 4 things, but I promise that I'll say them shortly. I mean, quickly. Yeah, you know what I mean. So I think number 1 is around creativity. I read recently, and I think it's so true, that for neurodivergent people with ADHD in particular, being creative is not a choice, it's a must. So you need to get what you need to get out of your job. You're not just there to give, you know, the company what the company needs. It is a two-way thing. So you need to make sure that you are building on the things that you know you really enjoy. And if you're not, like I said earlier, get the support, talk to people who understand that and to help you kind of find your way through it. And there are loads of people like that. Rolls-Royce, we're really lucky. And I think the other one really massively for me, having spent a lifetime with it on, is take off the mask. The more open you can be, the more you can be yourself, the easier it gets. And any barriers, again, that you come up against, get support, talk to people. I mean, if you do join us, you've already got our names, write them down, get in touch. And they're just the ones. Oh, last one. It's an opportunity to really, really learn and know and kind of hone your strengths as well, if you make it that. Don't feel grateful. You should never feel grateful for getting an opportunity that everyone else doesn't need to feel grateful for. You know worse than anyone else. Everyone's equal in that sense.
Fab. And Josh, final words of wisdom.
I don't think I have anything more to add. It's kind of all been said. So yeah, I think I'll just echo everything that's already been said. Literally, just do what you love, what you're interested in. But at the same time, I guess to kind of balance out everything that everyone's been saying is like, keep yourself accountable though. Like, kind of be disciplined with yourself and don't give yourself excuses. Like it's an explanation, it's not an excuse. So don't limit yourself. Don't do that. Don't go down that path. Just be understanding of your limitations, but also focus on your strengths and yeah. So that's kind of my view on things at the moment.
That goes for anyone, doesn't it? Anyone.
Yeah.
Anyone. It's just we've had to like focus on that probably more, but anyone should do that, shouldn't they? It's a brilliant way of summarising it.
Amazing. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for being part of the session and for being so open and sharing your thoughts. I'm going to bring it to a close there. But the good news is, if anyone has got any other questions or they want to kind of chat to us more about neurodiversity at Rolls-Royce, we've got a live chat scheduled for the 28th of October that you can sign up to and continue to talk to some of our graduates and apprentices. So please do join that and continue this conversation. You'll also be seen on screen shortly a sign up for the Nurture Pathway following this event. So there'll be some details on the screen. Please do sign up for that too, where you can kind of continue to hear from our graduates and apprentices. You'll get access to different Rolls-Royce content, and there'll be lots of topics like neurodiversity, but also on things like sustainability, our strategy, our values. So I really encourage you to sign up for that. And continue to look out for the other things that we've got going on in the Power Series. As I said, this is the first of 6 events. So please continue to sign up and to engage with us. Our graduate and internship opportunities are also live at the moment, so I'd encourage you to go and have a look on our careers website, and we will have our apprenticeship opportunities going live soon. And I will echo what these guys have said, just go for it. I always say to candidates that are a bit nervous, what's the worst that can happen? Every experience is going to be a good experience, and you'll learn something by going through it. If you've got any questions at any point during the process, or you feel nervous, or you feel like you may need some more support, or you're recently going through a diagnosis or something like that, please just get in touch with us, and we're more than happy to kind of have that conversation with you and talk to you about how we can help support you to get the best out of you within our process. We are definitely here to help, but as you've seen from Phoebe, Josh, Thomas and Rebecca, we really value the differences that individuals can bring, and that's what we need more of within Rolls-Royce. So we want to hear about you and want to hear about your story. So thank you again, and please don't forget to sign up for the various different things and to kind of to look for the pop-up on the screen that will appear. But thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you all have a lovely rest of your evening.